Hi all, this is Jaume from Openfort, and I'd like to show you how you can use the samples repository that we have created in the Openfort GitHub to get started using Openfort. So if you go here into Openfort XYZ and open the samples repository, you'll be able to find this example on Rainbow. So this specific example is using, as I was just mentioning, Rainbow Kit to connect to your wallet, WACME as a React hooks library for Ethereum, and then sign in with Ethereum, and then Next.js and NextAuth to authenticate on the server side. So what we will be doing in this very quick demo is implementing session keys to mint a certain asset without popups once we've created the session key. So this is a flow that we will create in this specific example. So we have the player, which represents the client side of the application, the game server, which will represent the API. So basically the serverless functions from Next.js, and then Openfort, and of course the blockchain. So let's go ahead and get started. So to get started, you simply have to clone this repository and cd into it. I've already done that here. Then you have to create your environments environments file to put the environment variables locally. So in this file, what you'll basically find, first off, is the secret key and the public key from Openfort. To get those, you simply have to go into the Openfort's dashboard and get them here. If you go into API keys, you copy the public key and you simply have to copy it here, and then same with the secret key. Of course, remember the secret key should never be shared, and the secret key is only to be used in the node package on the server side. The public key is only to be used in the client. I mean, not only to be used, but like it doesn't give like root access to the server. It's just to identify the user. Next, variables here are basically variables for next auth to work, like the NextAuth secret, the domain that we are doing the requests from. So next, what we want to do is to create a player, contract, and a policy. So we want to create a player because in this case, of course, we don't have a database running. And so when a user authenticates itself with the platform, what we would usually be doing is basically when a new user logs in, we create a new row in our database, and we assign the Openfort player ID with our own game player ID. And so every time we want to interact with the player ID, we know the Openfort player ID. In this case, we don't have a database, so what we will do is create a player ID before running the application, so we know which player is getting authenticated, and we'll put it here in this variable. Then we'll put a contract. Contract is a smart contract that we want this player to interact with. So basically, in this case, I added one example here in the README file, which is basically a simple NFT that allows anyone to mint. And then we create a policy which basically describes in what conditions we want to sponsor gas for the user or allow them to pay in custom ERC20 tokens, etc. So let's go ahead and create a player through the API. To interact with the API, we have created this reference documentation here. You can go into players, post, and so and here we go. Here is the request that we want to be doing. Here you can see there's your secret key in my dashboard. To make it easier, what we can do is create this local variable here. Basically, we copy the secret key and we paste it like that, and then we simply can go ahead and copy this and we create a player. So now we have just created a player. If we refresh here on the dashboard, this is the player that we have just created. We can go ahead now and create our first asset. We can either do it through the dashboard or through the API. We can go ahead here and do it through the API. So to do that, we go into asset contracts, we click on post, and we copy the request. Here is the contract that we want to take. So we just copy the address and we correct the chain ID, which in this case, on the example, we do it in Mumbai. So let's go ahead and copy this. All right. So we open the CLI and paste this. Openfort will go ahead and query the ABI and everything that you need to interact with this contract we just created. What we want to do when we keep creating these things is copy the ID from Openfort. So in this case, it's the contract. It's described by con, and so we just paste it here. Same with player. We can go ahead and copy it. Awesome. So now we want to create a policy. So here, as you can see here in the documentation, the policy needs to have the contract that we just created and a couple of rules. So the rules will be to interact with the contract and to be able to register session keys. And so let's go ahead and create a policy. We can call this policy sponsor all. the chain is in Mumbai, and we want to pay gas for the user as a strategy. Here would be also be possible to get to let the user pay in custom tokens for their gas, but let's not do that for now. So this is the actual thing that we want to do now. This is the content we just created and allow all functions. Let's add another rule where we allow the user to pay in where we want to sponsor the registration of session keys. So we simply add it, and this is the policy. We take the policy ID and we paste it in our local environment, just like that. And we are ready. We're ready to go. We can simply go ahead. Of course, need to install everything and just simply run yarn dev. So now it's running in local 3000. So let's go ahead and do that. Awesome. So basically what we will be doing right now, and let's do it step by step. First off, we're going to connect our wallet. Let's choose MetaMask. First, we get the verification of signing with Ethereum, where we verify that we are the owner of this account. We're using NextAuth here, so it will be embedded in the session key of who is the owner or who is being authenticated. In this case, it will be the address. So let's sign in. Right. So now we are signed in. We have the option of registering a session key first. So if we looked here in the documentation of session keys, what we have basically done now is the blue part. We have basically authenticated with the game server, and we have a session token that establishes who is authenticated, in this case with MetaMask and the address. What we want to do now is create a session key. So a session key is basically a key pair that lives in the client part of the application. Never the private key never leaves the client of the application, and we register the address of this client basically as one of the as basically a session key of this account that we will be deploying. The owner of this account will be the MetaMask that we have authenticated our users with. So this action and this flow is completely non-custodial, but as you will see, the interactions of the user are really, really smooth because there are no pop-ups after the session key has been created. So let's go ahead and create the session key. So if we create the session key, what we are basically doing is sending a request to Openfort to register a session key with a certain parameters, like how long is the session key valid for, as well as what functions it can interact with, etc. So if we sign the session key, we will be basically allowing our smart contract wallet to basically deploy to register this new session key. And so now we've registered our session key. So if you go ahead here and go into the transaction, this is the actual transaction that we've just done, the player that we registered in the beginning, and the account that has been deployed. So you can, of course, check like the account here. Awesome. So if we go ahead now and we can see the transaction hash that we used to register the session key. We can also see like the policy that we created before and how much gas we used to sponsor this transaction. And that's basically it. Cool. So now that we have registered a new session key, basically what we want to do is to collect an item. So here in the collect an item, we're basically minting an NFT with the contract that we added before. As you will see, there is absolutely no signing. Right, so you can see here in the network requests what's actually happening. We do like a request first into the game server backend, meaning that we want to collect a certain item, and then basically the game says, "Well, I cannot sign this transaction." Right, the game can never actually do the transaction itself. It needs to request the signing to the user, and that's actually what's happening here. So we basically request a signature and puts it back onto Openfort. And so basically now, if you go into the players. This is the player. You can see the transaction that we just did with the action that we just did, which is the mint. Here we can see first we requested to do a certain interaction with the contract that we created with the name mint. But of course, we needed to have, as a next action, we need to sign with the wallet. And so once we give the signature, we are basically able to put the transaction on chain. So here from the example, when we first request to create the session key, we're basically from the API, the developer's server, we specify for how long we want the session key to last, as well as all the parameters that we want. And so basically we send this request to Openfort, then Openfort sends it back to the developer sends it back to the user signs it with MetaMask. As long as when the user signs it with MetaMask, we send it to Openfort, and then that goes on chain. So that's as you can see, that's the whole demo of the samples rainbow example. Here you can see everything that we've just done. So yes, if you have any other questions that I can help solve, please do not hesitate to get in touch. We have here like the support documentation, and feel free to reach out. Thank you for your time.